Good evening, everyone. Wow, it is a crowd streaming in here tonight. My name is Julie Womack. I am the head of organizing for Red, Wine, and Blue. So happy to see so many people here just because I know that means you care about what's going on in this country and you are here to learn and get informed. So if you have been to one of our events before, because we do a lot of events every Tuesday, Thursday evening, so glad to have you back. If you are brand new to Red, Wine, and Blue, welcome. We are really glad to have you here. The author of the best-selling book on tyranny, Timothy Snyder, is joining us to discuss the urgent threat of authoritarianism and what we can do to resist it right now. Also, the author of the his latest book is on freedom, so please check all of those out. He is a professor of history and global affairs at Yale University and a permanent fellow at the Institute for Human Sciences in Vienna. He is a scholar of history on Central and Eastern Europe, on the Holocaust. And I love this, Professor Snyder. You speak 5 languages and read 10 European languages. I had to throw that in because that's quite amazing. So, welcome. We are so glad to have you here with us tonight.
I'm so glad to be with you.
So On Tyranny outlines 20 lessons from the 20th century on resisting authoritarianism. What inspired you to write this book when you did?
When I wrote it in a few days at the end of 2016. So it's actually, it's 8 years old and a few weeks at this point. And I wrote it, so to speak, on three timelines. The first timeline was that Donald Trump had just won the presidential election in the United States. And I had been, in my own way, covering that. I had mostly been writing about his connections with Russia, but I'd also been writing about the ways that his public gatherings, his rallies made me uneasy because they reminded me of the politics of the 1920s and 1930s. So that's one timeline. Another timeline was I'd spent those years of the 2000 teens, 2010s writing about Russia and Ukraine. And a number of the things which I'd noticed in Russia and Ukraine, the oligarchy, the big lies, the disinformation, were helped me, I think, to see what was happening in the United States. And then the third timeline was over decades that I'd been a historian of political atrocity and the worst forms of rule my whole career. And so those three things came together in that point. And I wrote on tyranny meant as an immediate guide to what to do right now, but drawing on things that I thought I had learned in the preceding years and about the preceding decades.
So On Tyranny has had amazing success. I know my group chat is blowing up, but when I said we were doing this event, more and more people were talking about it. Has that surprised you? Can you tell us a moment when you realized the impact that the book was having?
I wrote it, it surprised me I mean, I wrote it like I do a lot of things, as a kind of Hail Mary. Like there are quite a few moments where I feel like, okay, somebody's got to do something right now, and this thing that I'm about to do is probably a little weird, but I'm going to do it anyway. And sometimes that lands, and sometimes it doesn't land. With On Tyranny, I had written this 20 points on a Facebook page, and that got a lot of attention. And I proposed to my editor that we issue this as an ebook. And this is a guy called Tim Dugan, and he very intelligently said, no, write it up with some more detail, and we'll publish it as a small, simple printed book, which was a brilliant idea. And then he and the good people at the publishing house were able to get it out within 6 weeks, which is kind of incredible. But at the beginning, in February 2017, when it came out, I was literally carrying it around in a backpack and just passing it out to people randomly. And there were weeks of that. And it's like it was sort of symbolic of the larger problem that people didn't really understand what kinds of changes were about to happen. That's how I experienced it anyway. And so I was going around handing it out, talking to local groups. I had like a printout of the 20 lessons that I would post on bulletin boards and stuff. It blew up when I had a conversation with Bill Maher. That's when it finally like that. I had a conversation with Bill Maher when he kind of made a joke, and I said, "Okay, Bill, stop." And I made him be quiet for a bit, and then we turned to the main subject, and that was the moment when On Tyranny took off. But what really got to me, or what touched me the most, was when I heard it being read in like the Indian Parliament, or when I saw posters like wildcat posters, unofficial posters being made of it to post in Hong Kong. Or there was a night when there was a Polish protest march in 2017 where I was walking with my daughter and it was getting very late and she was on my shoulders and we were listening to someone speaking as the night fell and the words sounded familiar and I realized, oh, that guy is reading On Tyranny in Polish. Like that's what's happening right now in this moment. So there were a number of things like that where it hit me that this had gone way beyond where I thought it was ever going to go. I was hoping that a few Americans would read it, and it became a much more global thing.
Well, and I think your editor or your publisher was brilliant because right now, with everything going on, people are feeling overwhelmed. Having that short book that you can really learn quickly and dive into and get through without, having a big tome to read would never like land right now. So your publisher was brilliant. So some people right now might believe that tyranny just can't happen here. What do you say to people who maybe are even still saying that?
Here is the only place it's ever happened.
Okay,
I
wow.
mean, think about that. It's always somebody's here. Here is the only place that it's ever happened. That's it. I mean, there are other, so I'm just, by that, and by that I mean, one of the things I mean when I say that is people always think it's not happening where they are, right? But here is the only place it ever happens, and here is where you are. So here is where you have to act. The other point I would make about that is that whatever you're doing, you're making some kind of a historical difference. And part of what you're doing is what you're saying. And if what you're saying is it can't happen here, you are then actively contributing to it happening here because you are disarming yourself and you are disarming other people and you're conceding that very precious resource, which is time. If you slow down your own action and others' actions, then you are conceding time and allowing things to get further ahead. And the further ahead it gets, the harder it will be to react. And I guess the third point that I want to make is that, and On Tyranny ends on this note, or it's close to the end where I have a few brief remarks on American exceptionalism. American exceptionalism is, it's like Missouri, like show me, like the moment that if you think that you're exceptional, then you're in trouble. Because when you're busy thinking you're exceptional, then totally normal things are going to happen to you, like your democracy is going to go under. That's totally normal. You have to act like you're exceptional. And so that's the trick, right? American exceptionalism is a way to destroy democracy because if you say, oh, it can't happen here because we're America, you're making it happen here. On the other hand, if you say, okay, I'm going to show how I'm a good American by doing things, well, then you've understood.
Okay, so there are 20 lessons in On Tyranny, and I guess the question is they're probably all relevant, but which of them, and I'm going to have Drew bring up a slide. We kind of laid them out on two slides so people who have not yet read the book can see them. Which of them do you think are most relevant in the US today, and which ones do you think are we already seeing that are being implemented?
There's one here which I wanted to mention particularly. Number 4, take responsibility for the face of the world. That may not be the most important one, but I just wanted to give it. So take responsibility for the first face of the world is about the swastikas, essentially. It's about, the example I give is if you see a swastika, you should whitewash over that swastika. You shouldn't let those public symbols change what's normal. You should act against them. But of course, it can also be positive. So a lot of my mind right now is with my Ukrainian friends, and there are a lot of Ukrainians who are desperately hoping that there are Americans who are on their side. And there's one young Ukrainian woman who I don't know personally at all, but who I follow, who said in particular that the only thing, I'm just quoting her now, right? I'm quoting, the only thing which is keeping her going is suburban wine moms who hang the Ukrainian flag. Okay, so I'm gonna put that out there as an example of a positive thing you can do to take responsibility for the face of the world. The most important is always number one. Do not obey in advance. Because that's the key to everything else. Do not obey in advance means that you have to treat your normal as normal and not let the normal of the world move you along towards something else. So do not obey in advance means resisting the drift to follow what's being made normal for you, but to set down your heels, put down a marker, plant a flag, and say, "This is my normal, and I'm not gonna move from here." You may not know what to do, but just saying, "This is what I regard as normal. I'm going to hold on here and not change mentally." That's the most important because it's necessary for everything else. It has to come first. Um, and then as far as the rest of them, the ones that have been on my mind lately on this first page are number 9 and 10. Be kind to our language and believe in truth. I think a lot of the ugly things which are going on now involve terrible lies by Musk and by Trump, and also incredibly abusive language. And it's important to use the language in a way which is firm and which is clear in response. It's important not to descend to become, just to bark and to yell the way that they do. But it's also very important to be careful and precise and terse and clear with our English language. And then believing in truth, of course, is incredibly important. So much of what's happening now is based upon gaslighting and rapid changes of the goalposts and using words to mean the opposite of what they mean. And so having the confidence that comes from looking at the situation and saying, I can actually tell the truth here. I can say the thing which is going on. I don't have to react to what they're doing all the time. I've got a sense of what's happening myself. Here's the truth. I still believe these are all very important. In the way On Tyranny is written, roughly speaking, the worse things get, the further down the line you get. So number 20 is number 20 for that reason. And then fortunately, we've gone pretty far down the line where number 18, be calm when the unthinkable arrives, is really important because we're already, I think, across that line of unthinkability where things are happening pretty much all the time, which in a more normal moment, or let's say a decade ago, or even 2 years ago, if any one of these things happened, it would have seemed like completely impossible. A crack has opened in the earth and swallowing us. And that level of event is now happening all the time. And so associating precisely unthinkability with calm is very important. Okay, so something unthinkable happened. That means that I have to be calm. That's the name of the game. Because if the unthinkability makes me panic, then I'm just dancing around this opening chasm in the earth, and I'm not being helpful to other people. And likewise, number 19, I think, is really important now. Defining patriotism as serving other people, as helping other people out, as being with other people, as solidarity, but not letting patriotism go, right? Not letting patriotism be claimed by the nationalists who just use it to bully others and exclude others, to make others feel bad, to make others suffer, to make others die. So being a patriot in that sense of showing solidarity, of reaching out to others, of being empathetic, but claiming the signs of patriotism, I think that's also very important right now.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And I hope that was helpful for people who have yet to read the book, but I'm sure are going to be as soon as this webinar is over. You have warned against accepting the gradual erosion of norms. What are some warning signs that people may not be taking seriously enough right now?
I mean, I imagine I'm talking to a group, and I'm glad to be talking to a group which has been noticing a lot of warning signs. I'm afraid I don't want to sugarcoat any of this. We're past the point where these are really warning signs. We're in the moment where the American Republic is being taken apart piece by piece. And so I think it's more a matter of noticing what those parts are and how they're being removed. At this stage in the game, some of the things that I think are particularly worth noticing have to do with, first, the basic functionality of government. So who is actually doing the things that matter, which are no longer necessarily elected officials, which are often just, young men who surround Elon Musk. A second thing worth paying attention to is where the money is going. We are in a strange situation where we can't trust the Treasury anymore. And so the monies that we're about to pay in taxes in April is going in an unknown direction. And I think that's something that people perhaps should pay a little bit more attention to than we are. That if what kind of republic is it if we don't actually know where our taxes are going to go? A third thing that I would draw attention to would be, which is not, it's not a warning sign again, it's like a way of doing politics, are these like bullying sessions or these this mobbing, which is becoming more and more public. So the thing that Trump and Vance, and what's that guy's name? Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend, Brian Glenn. The thing that they did in the Oval Office the other day is kind of like it's just an example of a general of these kinds of, of these bullying sessions. It makes me think of Austria in March of 1938, when the country was falling apart and people were making circles around Jews and and saying and doing terrible things to them. That kind of thing as a way of doing politics has to be noticed and called out and also mocked. That's very important. And I think like that version of masculinity where it's like men ganging up on other men, or in Zelensky's case, it was one man, but men ganging up on women, men ganging up on trans people, men ganging up on immigrants, whatever it might be. But like that ganging up is a bad sign because that's people reinforcing other people to be their worst selves, essentially. So those are some of the things. I mean, it's a very long list, unfortunately, of ways that the wheels are falling off the car at this point.
When you say, I'm interested in what you were talking about in the past, when you say that has to be mocked, like that mobbing needs to be mocked. Like how did people in prior instances mock that? And I know now we have social media, and is that the best way? Or what's your advice on that in terms of like people on this call maybe who want to be able to do that?
I think like, yeah, that the category of strength is incredibly important here because Trump's superpower is that he draws strength from people who submit to him. He doesn't like he that it's it. It's like he's a supervillain who touches you and takes your strength. He doesn't have anything else. And so the people who submit to him believe that he is strong, but it's completely teleological, right? Like it's completely circular. He is strong because I have submitted to him. And so you see these people who have submitted to him, and they behave in this very strange way because they're constantly talking about how he's strong and he's infallible and all this stuff. And if you don't believe that, it seems very weird to you, right? And you may not know how to react to it. And I think it's pretty important to performatively react to it by claiming strength in different ways, by using the word strong, but not in an arrogant way, using the word strong to define collective action, using the word strong to define togetherness, using the word strong in different ways. And as far as mocking goes, I think pageantry and public act, I mean, social media is fine and like memes are fine, and you you can't you can't drop that ball. But I think being in public is more important. I think being in public is where the balloons really get popped, because if you're in public not being afraid of Trump, or if you're in public trying to take the idea of strength away from them, that's, I think, when you actually make an impression on people. I don't Online, I don't know. Has anyone ever changed their mind online in the history of being online? I mean, you can't let them dominate it, but you can't expect to win there either. I think the place where you win is the place where you do your pageantry and you do your most effective mockery and you try out your slogans has to be real life.
Okay, well, that's good to know and leads kind of right into the next question I wanted to ask you, which is, what are the most effective actions for ordinary citizens, that we can take to fight back against creeping authoritarianism? I know there were so many things listed in your 20 lessons, like standing out, and what you just described, like being public. But, if I'm not a politician, I'm an average everyday citizen who just cares about what's happening in my community and nationwide. What is your what's your advice on that? What are effective actions that people can be taking right now?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is to be said is that party politics is very important. And if you've got candidates that you like I've got people I like who are going to be running for stuff. Dr. Amy Alt is going to be running for governor of Ohio, and she's an amazing, amazing person. And I'm already going to start talking about her and giving money and so on. But that's one track. And that election, we have to think of that election as being like 20,000 years away. And how are we going to get across those 20,000 years? Like it's an ice age from now. It's a really long time from now, the way things are going. And so party politics, yes, like your favorite candidates, yes, that's all right and good. But we can't expect, and I say this with I say it with love, but we cannot expect the Democratic Party is going to be doing all the things that need to be done. So you have to separate yourself out and not wait for them and not think they're going to be the ones who are going to do the things. The only footnote to that is that if you see ones who are performing, who are up to the moment, and in my mind, other people will no doubt have other ideas, but in my mind, that would be AOC, and that would be Jamie Raskin, Jasmine Crockett, a few others, but like the ones who are actually calling things by name, like celebrate them, like prop them up because what they're doing is actually pretty hard. It's hard, even if you're a famous national politician, being in a minority like that is pretty hard. Okay. But the main thing to do is to be on the other track. And being on the other track means, and this is important, recognizing that this is not going to be easy and it's not going to be fast, right? It's going to involve a million little acts of solidarity and togetherness. There is no magic button that any of us can push to make this okay. And there is nobody who can tell you how this is automatically going to be okay. And if anybody comes to you and says, like, I know exactly how this is going to sort out and it's going to be fine, like, you can't listen to that person because things are already very bad. And there's no way that we can be sure how they're going to turn out. The best thing to do is to make sure you have your small and medium-sized scale actions to make sure that you're doing things with people you like and admire, to make sure that you're doing things that keep you engaged on a regular basis, to make sure that you're doing things that don't allow you to feel alone, which is really important because this is serious. It's very serious, but it is not hopeless. It's not hopeless, but hope is a fire that many people have to work together to keep going, right? Nobody can keep that little fire of hope going all by herself. So those are the most important things. Local, don't imagine you have to do everything by yourself. Make sure you're with people you like and admire. Regular action and just like think of what you're doing. Like there are various metaphors for it, but like think of what you're doing as like you're the boulder that slows down the avalanche, right? You're the tree that slows down the avalanche. You're doing something, and then other people out there are also doing something, right? And there are a lot of people out there who are doing things you don't see.
Well, thank you so much because everything you just said reinforced what Red, Wine, and Blue is trying to do. Like we are trying to build that community. We are trying to have people who, near each other, getting together, building those local groups. We are giving actions to take. And everybody, by just joining this call tonight, has taken an action. You're here to learn, and you are now going to go out and talk to your friends and your family. And thank you for saying that there is no magic button because I think many of us just want to see this end, and it's really important to know that we need to take those small steps and keep working together. Um, your lesson about make eye contact and small talk, it may seem like a small thing to people, but can you explain why everyone here, like, explain what that means and why it's so important?
All right, I'll start with the dark end of it. When you're heading towards a tyrannical situation, you need to be quite aware of the world around you. And so just out of self-protection, you need to be in the habit of making eye contact and paying attention to how people are treating you. That's the dark side of it, which some Americans, already know about, right? Some Americans more than others, I think, are aware of this. The bright side of eye contact and small talk is this, that you will never find ways of breaking through if you're not listening. And you will never get anybody to listen to you unless they think you're human. And so like confrontation is really tempting and sometimes it's necessary. Um, Sometimes it's necessary. Sometimes people cross lines and you have to respond. But very often when confrontation is necessary, it's when you're speaking to a large group. Like that's when you have to be super clear. But the only way that someone's going to listen to you one-on-one is if you've made the eye contact, if you've made the small talk, because that will help them to see you as human, which is 95% of it right there. If they see you as human, as not like some kind of whatever, some outsider, some elitist, whatever. If you can get over that, that's 95% of the battle. And if you can get over that, then you can say things which will never convince them. They're never going to be convinced by things you say. It's more that you say things that they might remember and which might later make some kind of a difference. But the other thing about eye contact, then there's the medium part. So there was the heavy, there was the light, there's also the medium, which is that you will feel better if you make eye contact and small talk. You will. Like it's a way to kind of keep going and to remember that you're the majority, that you're the one who's on the right side, but also that you're the one who's in the majority, and that you're the one. This is also really important. Like small talk is supposed to be nice. It's really important, and I don't think this group particularly has a problem with this, but it's really important to have a better time than they're having. which is a low bar. Like if you look at Trump and Musk and Vance, they're not actually having a good time. Like they're angry, they have grievances. Like it's kind of extraordinary that you can be, you can be a billionaire and like the president or the supreme leader or whatever Musk is, and you're still angry all the time, right? You're still angry. And that anger, like that sense of grievance, that's their mode, right? They are going to be in that to the end. They will never stop having that sense of grievance. And although things are very tough for us, and although they are hurting us and they're hurting people we love, that we love, it's really important to be the ones who, have the monopoly on happiness, right? Like to remember that like we can laugh, like we can be together, we can smile. And so the eye contact and small talk is also for people that you're close to, right? Like to make just to remind them, okay, it's all right to have it's all right to have this cup of coffee. It's all right to feel normal. It's all right to have this hug.
We actually just put out a video that kind of emphasized everything you just said about finding the joy because there's so much happening right now, and people feel the need that they have to do everything they can to fight back constantly, but that will burn you out. And like you just said, we need to be able to still do the normal things and share with each other. So I really appreciate what you just said
Like
about that.
all the like I've known, I mean, I'm sure a bunch of people on this call have too, but I've known a bunch of people who have sat in prison for a really long time for their beliefs or for the actions that they've taken. And without exception, they were all people who like to go for runs or they like to tell jokes, like they're humans, and maybe even slightly more so. Like they have foibles and they have senses of humor. And that's like you're not supposed to become an inhuman robot doing this. If anything, you're going to become a little bit more human while you're doing this.
Right, and I believe the authoritarians want us to be divided. They want us to feel alone, and by building community and coming together, we're actually fighting back against that. The other thing that we talk a lot about at Red Wine and Blue is fighting disinformation, and I know one of the lessons here is truth. So how can people push back against misinformation and propaganda?
Yeah, I think that may be the ultimately the most fundamental battle that like in a way that's the cradle of everything else, the disinformation. People have to take responsibility for their bad choices, of course, but people are making bad choices within a game, which is shaping their mentalities and nudging them repeatedly in a certain direction. So this isn't going to happen now, but in the long run, if the good guys are ever in power again, we have to try to regulate social media in such a way as to reinforce factuality and to support local news. In the meantime, it's very important to be healthy consumers. So that means, and like there's less and less of the good stuff, but there's still plenty of the good stuff. And it's very important to identify it and to praise it. And this may seem really simple, but to pay money to subscribe to it, right? So, like ProPublica has been doing, or ProPublica has been doing great work. I think they work mainly on donations. Wired has been doing extraordinary work on Musk and the tech aspect of all of this. I think they have like 70,000 new subscribers in the past couple of weeks. The Philadelphia Inquirer, is like become one of my pet newspapers because they still do real journalism and they have a nice editorial page. But just like picking two or three more of those and paying that $20 a year or whatever it is for a subscription, that's really worthwhile. And then when you're online, sharing that stuff, like supporting those journalists, because it actually like it matters for us, but it also matters to the journalists that you're sharing their stuff. Because there are so few of them actually. We're down to a few, like we're actually down to like in the high hundreds, roughly true full-time working journalists in the US, which is kind of crazy, but that's where we are. And then, the other thing is that you have to say you have to say that you believe in truth. You can't be cynical. This is like in public, I try to say in public a lot that I believe in truth because um, I have a certain cachet, and so I'm allowed to say things that sound crazy and naive. And like I believe in truth sounds crazy and naive. But we have to believe in truth. We have to say, okay, some things are more true than others, and things that have been investigated are more reliable than things that haven't been investigated, and people who have skills and so on and so forth. We have to, I think, be in a position to say that from time to time as well. That's part of the story.
Well, go Philadelphia Inquirer because we have lots of members in Pennsylvania as one of our states where we have organizers on the ground. And I agree. There are some really incredible journalists still out there, and they are definitely being beaten down by this administration. So supporting that, and that leads right into my next question, which is about supporting independent journalism. And you've kind of already touched on this, but I'd like to just broaden it. And in the meantime, too, if you have questions, we are going to go to some Q&A in just a second here with Professor Schneider. So please drop those in the chat. We may not get to all of them, but we'll try to kind of get the general questions that are coming in through the chat next. What news sources, you've mentioned a few here, ProPublica and Philadelphia Inquirer. Any other sources that you turn to a lot or that you know would be of interest to people in attendance tonight?
Well, if you have a local newspaper which has reporters, please subscribe to it. There aren't that many, but they exist. Some of them, even some of them still in print. Um, the Tennessee Holler. I mean, I'm talking to the whole country now, right? So it's a little bit hard. But in Ohio, there's something called the Capital Journal or the Ohio Capital Journal, which is like micro focused on Ohio politics and is incredibly good. So you find out what your local newspaper is or something else in the state or the region and support that. Um, I subscribe in print to the Guardian weekly edition. I mean, they might be going down the tubes now because they seem to be selling out to AI, but that's one thing that I've read. The Week is an interesting compilation of national news and international news. So it gives you a sense of things that are happening all around the country, and it is balanced in the sense that it publishes left wing and right wing things, but it does it in it does balance in a sane way as opposed to like here's some insanity and here's some facts. It's more like here's a lot of journalism and then here's some reasonable opinions on both sides. So the Week is another thing that I subscribe to. And then I make it a point to subscribe to things that are just fun too. So like keep that in mind as well. Like there's nothing wrong to subscribing to, Sports Illustrated or whatever, keeps you going.
Absolutely. You got to go back to that, the fun part, right? You got to have the joy, you got to have the fun. So 100%. And I'm in Ohio, so thank you for mentioning Dr. Amy Acton, and thank you for mentioning the Capital Journal. Those are both great things in Ohio. I am going to have Drew bring up our national organizer, Julie Collins, now because I know she's been trying to keep up with the chat. I know it's been moving, so I think she has some questions from the attendees tonight who they want to ask you.
Yes, and there are lots of them, and we are definitely not going to get to all of them. But some of the things that I think are important to maybe go over a little bit, folks are really looking for what to do. And one of the things that they have been asking a lot about is what to do specifically, what types of protests to do. And one of the things that was brought up was regarding taxes. And, I don't, I think that people think that they should do things that they've seen, maybe in movies or books or whatever, but they don't know all of the background that goes into it. Judy Richardson, who was one of the founding members of SNCC, is on this call, and so I always caution folks when they start to plan for something radical, make sure that you know all of the ins and outs before you do something of that nature. So somebody asked, what can we do, like a short term, a medium term, and maybe a long term goal that would be helpful in this fight?
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate what you're saying about protest and organization as being something where you want to be with people who are experienced. And one of the things that's been on my mind a lot lately are unions. So that if you can be part of a union, you should try to be part of a union, I believe. And the private sector in the US is only about 6% unionized. And it's going to be, in talking about the long term, it's going to be hard to do big time organizing without labor unions. So that this may not affect that many of you, but it's something to think about. We're not going to be able to do big time organizing without unions. And then another point that you make, which is really important, is that when you protest, make sure you have a plan for what you're doing. So, make sure that you have an idea if the police do come, what are you going to do? Where are you going to go? And that shouldn't be frightening. You should it's just important to have a plan with who am I going to this protest and where are we going to go afterwards? And if it doesn't work out, what's our contingency plan? That said, and I realize this is a hot issue right now, I am definitely on the side of people who think we should be protesting. because it has to be normalized. You can see how concerned Trump is about it by this recent tweet where he talked about like if any, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but this is basically the spirit. If students protest on college campuses, we're going to lock them up or deport them. And that's like the thing which really concerned me about last year was that, I mean, I'm just putting out Israel and Palestine in the brackets for a second, because in a way, it doesn't matter what you think about that. What matters is whether you think people should be allowed to protest in public. And a lot of energy was put into delegitimizing and denormalizing the idea of protest on campus and associating it with criminality and associating it with evil intentions. And that was an organized campaign, right? The idea is to make people think that protest itself is a criminal activity. And so I think it's really important for people to protest now, because if you protest now, then you will be able to protest later, most likely. If you don't protest now, it's unlikely you're going to be able to protest later, right? So that it's at this particular stage in the game, especially for those of us, and this varies by, citizenship status, immigration status, race, gender, a lot of other things. But like for those of us for whom it's relatively safe, I think it's pretty important to put a marker out. As far as how to do it, I would go back to like joyful mode and surprising mode and flash mob mode, like things which turn up and are surprising and get people's attention and like and provide a positive message and show that they're human beings doing unpredictable things. That kind of thing is what I think we need right now. And I've seen a lot of positive examples of that, like the protests around Tesla have given some great examples of that.
Mm-hmm. Um, do boycotts help? Is what someone asked.
Yeah, boycotts absolutely help. Yeah, yeah, boycotts absolutely help. I mean, boycotts plus pageantry, right? Like the boycott
Mhm.
of Tesla, it not only like I'm not saying you're not gonna bankrupt Vance. I mean, sorry, you're not gonna little slip of the tongue there. You're not gonna bankrupt Musk by boycotting Tesla, but you are gonna create trouble for him. And if you can combine the boycotts with protests, you can change the image of the guy a little bit from, whatever his positive image is to somebody who makes a terrible product. You can do that. Like you can hang things around their necks by boycotting and by protesting. And it's also a way like to change the moral vector a little bit. So like American companies have been so obedient and anticipatorily obedient about the quote unquote DEI stuff. And so like you can protest that, but you can also reverse protest. You can say, well, hold, wait a minute, Apple, I hope this example is still up to date. Apple is actually doing okay on this. So, I'm going to buy Apple stuff and I'm going to tell people I'm buying Apple stuff. So you can also reverse boycott. You can say, hey, in comparison to company X, company Y is actually doing pretty well.
Mhm. Like people have been doing, I think, with Costco as an example too. So he has said that he's not going to follow what maybe a judge has ordered him to do or not to do. And so what do we do about that? If he does ignore an order, a direct order that is given to him by a judge, how should we, how should we look at that? What should we do? Do we respond in kind? What are the things that we should be doing if he decides to go out on that kind of a limb?
I mean, that's a hard one, which I think probably would bear having a whole separate conversation about. But the lesson number two in On Tyranny is defend institutions, and this
Mhm.
is part of what I have in mind, where judges and courts, because it's the co-optation or the denigration of judges and courts which allows you to get to the kind of electoral autocracy. So in a number of cases, Hungary, Poland, it almost happened. It's when they either manage to make the courts political or, because it can happen at the same time, ignore court rulings, that you
Mhm.
then find yourself to a place where only the executive power really matters, which is, of course, what Trump wants. So I think it's really important to stand behind courts, like not all courts, not at all times. This is the tricky part, but to stand behind courts physically, right? Like so in Poland, there were protests which were in favor of judges as such. like independent judges, like we want independent judges. And like having people out on the streets for the rule of law is a little abstract, but having people out on the streets for judges is maybe a little bit less abstract. But ultimately, if 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 he doesn't observe a court ruling, we're in constitutional crisis. And the executive, whose only job under the Constitution really is to observe the law and enforce the law, has then done the exact opposite of what he's meant to do. And so that is constitutional crisis. And I think one has to, if it comes to that, one has to name it as such, and one has to say, the president is no longer serving as the president. He's doing something completely different. We're now in a completely different political world in which we have to consider all sorts of radical things as now being possible because the president is no longer the president. I think that's the fundamental way you have to conceive of it. That at that moment, I mean, he's done all kinds of things now. He's broken, dozens of laws
Mhm.
already. But
Mhm.
if he declines explicitly to fulfill a court ruling, then he is doing the thing which is exactly what the Constitution, not only the Constitution doesn't says he can't do it, it's the opposite of the thing, right?
Mhm.
It's the satanic opposite of the Constitution. And at that point, I think you have to be able to say he has chosen to act no longer as the president. At this point, we don't have a president because we have no one who's fulfilling the functions of the president, and then reason from there.
Okay. Okay. So we have a lot of folks in our circle, if you will, who maybe they can't get out and do a protest or even a flash mob or whatever, and they call themselves, the keyboard warriors. So the folks who are maybe a little older and, can't really get out there and do things, but we can write letters and we can do those kinds of things. What do you advise those folks to be maybe concentrating on?
Yeah, um, that's a great question. I mean, number one is try to get other people out,
Mhm.
right? Like, because in every, and you guys know this very well, but in every organization, getting people out to a protest or arranging a protest a lot of it's done by people who are not actually going to be physically there. So helping with that. Another one I already mentioned, which is being the people who repost the good journalism, like disciplining yourself to only posting good journalism or very smart positive messaging from political people you really trust. But doing that, like making sure you're subscribing to good stuff. It's like the chat is like switches every 100th of a second, but there was a moment where it was like 100 things to subscribe to, or like in 4 seconds. So like doing that and subscribing and reposting. And then another thing which you all know, and which sounds really old-fashioned, but the senators and the representatives are still counting the phone calls, and they're still counting the letters, and they're still counting the emails. And even if they're running away from town halls, they still have staffers who are paying attention to all of this. So, like efficient contacting of elected representatives, not only federal but also state, is still something that can be done.
And then is there a way that we can hurt their pocketbooks? Somebody said.
I mean, we already talked about boycotts.
Hmm. Is there
I mean,
anything
there's
else we can?
certainly in blue state. I mean, I think blue states should be paying more attention to laws on having to do with money laundering. The
Mhm.
the U.S. Treasury just announced that it's not going to enforce its most important statute on money laundering, and that's something that blue states should be trying to do more about. Um, the the problem with the pocketbook thing is that they're busy hurting their own pocketbooks. Like, like where the tariffs are going to be disastrous for the red states.
Mhm.
Canada's going to make sure of that.
Mhm.
China is probably not going to be as deft as Canada, but they're basically, I mean, the stock market's going to crash now. I mean, a week from now, you can look back at this and laugh at me, but I'm pretty sure we're looking at negative economic growth in the first quarter and a big
Mhm.
stock market collapse. So they're hurting
Mhm.
themselves a lot. And so maybe rather than thinking about how to hurt them directly, it would be more important. And then this goes back to the keyboard warriors question a little bit, to find the language which connects the dots,
Mhm.
because it's incredible. Like the human capacity to rationalize stuff is incredible. And I mean, I deal with a lot of folks who voted for Trump, for various reasons, and it's incredible how people can rationalize stuff. How it's like,
Mhm.
this is like this is Obama's fault, and this is Hillary's fault. It's
Mhm.
just it's a people are still talking about Obama,
Mhm.
like and and so just finding patient ways to connect the dots.
Mhm.
Trump said he was going to have a tariff. You voted for a tariff. Here's what the tariff did to your town. Patient, quick, simple, that kind of language. I think that may be more important because obviously when the economy, I mean, I wish this isn't weren't true. And it makes me so sad that so many people are going to suffer, whether they voted for him or didn't. But what they're going to do with the suffering, and what Musk especially is going to do with the suffering, is say it's the immigrants, it's the black people, it's the trans people, it's the Canadians. It's everybody else except for the people who actually made the policy of destroying the government, which of course is Musk number one and Trump number two. And so we have to be able to have a simple story about how. No, in fact, when you did away with consumer protection, this meant poisoning. No, in fact, when you fired everybody at the NIH, this meant epidemics. No, in fact, when you fired everybody at the EPA, this meant carcinogens in the water. No, in fact, when you chose to put tariffs on Canada, that was going to mean no fertilizer for America's farmers in the heartland. We've got to have those lessons very simple over and over and over again because it's like they're already supplying the economic pain for themselves. And now it's just a question of interpretation.
Okay, that's really good. So the folks, and I think you touched on this a little bit. Can you just go back to folks who are saying, "Oh, well, we just need to wait for the midterms"? I believe you said that's already far out and too far out to be focusing on at the moment. But I have actually seen that and heard that quite a bit on social media and even amongst people that I talk to regularly.
Okay, so if you are actually a Democratic Party politician or you are an American citizen and you have chosen to run for office, if you're running for office, then the next election is the right moment for you to be thinking about. But if you are not, in fact, running for office,
Thank
then
you.
it's not, right? Then it's
Mhm.
not. And I'm saying two things here. One thing I'm saying is people really should be running for offices because we have
Mhm.
elections every year, not just every two, every four. There are elections every year. And we need to have people, good people, running for local offices all over the country, right? We need that. But the other thing that I'm saying is that if you're not running for office, then your timeline has to be a different timeline. It has to be this week, this month, and things I'm doing this week and this month, which I can repeat and which I can amplify, which I can scale, which I can share with other people. It's really, and then the other way I would think about this is that the Democrats can't really do this on their own. They can only, and it's not just a matter of people coming out to vote or not vote. I mean, I think if we have a straight, but if we have a straight election, I think they're going to do fine. But the question is like getting to a straight election, which involves a lot of work between now and then to gum up the works and not to allow them to normalize and destroy. But it also means, and this is where the sort of the activism and the career politics comes together. It also means you have to create the possibility for the Democrats to have exciting politicians. You have to let them profile themselves because there's a natural competition among them about who is going to meet this moment. And
Mhm.
if we're all sitting back and saying, well, the Democrats are going to sort this out, let's wait for the elections, it's like we're denying them that chance to be interesting, right? And we got to give them that chance. We got to give them that chance. And we also have to give them that chance to be profiling for the next presidential election if we can get there, right? But we're not going to notice the ones who are actually meeting the moment if we're not meeting the moment ourselves. And so it's up to us to meet the moment to kind of create the conditions where they can meet the moment. Because we can't expect if we want if we want them to be, doing protests at Treasury, if we want them to be doing radical stuff, then we have to be doing radical stuff ourselves. Because if we don't do it, then they're also not going to be doing it.
Professor Snyder, I know we've kept you a few minutes longer than we promised, so I do want to thank you so much for joining us tonight. Obviously, there was huge interest in hearing from you. I recommend highly that everybody go and read on tyranny and also on freedom. Um, Anything you want to say before we bid you goodbye?
No, I just want to say I'm so glad that so many of you are here, and I hope that in our conversation we got to some of your questions, and that this was helpful for you. And above all, keep working together, keep at it, keep smiling. Make sure you're doing something. That's the most important thing.
We
Thank you.
appreciate your time, and obviously, like I said, we had 5,000 people watching a live stream too. So I know there was too many questions to potentially possibly get to, but we think you answered the bulk of what people really did want to hear about. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you for your books and for speaking out. We appreciate
Yeah.
that.
Okay. Well,
Um,
thank you, Julie. Thank you, Julie. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. So I know that everybody has learned so much from Professor Snyder tonight and his lessons on how to uh, stand up to extremism and face down authoritarianism. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, we now are going to stay on for a short time for an after party. This is the time that we are going to show you how you can make a difference right now, and also how you can find the people near you who agree with you so that we can build community around our values and stand up to defeat this extremism that we see happening in our country. Professor Snyder talked about defending institutions, be aware of a one-party state. So what does that mean? We need to protect elections, and that means we need to make sure that our voices are heard, and we need to make sure that voters turn out at the next election. That means you need to get your friends and families to the polls. So we're going to talk about how we do that. Another lesson was that you need to believe in truth and stand out, which means we need leaders who are going to share facts, spread that real information, uplift that good journalism. Standing out means you need to be a leader. Everybody on this call can be a leader, and we're going to talk again about how we can do that. One of the ways is by getting involved with our program called Rally. Rally is a platform where you can build your list of voters who you are going to turn out at the next election. It's also a place where we could give you good information to share about things that are going on in Congress, things that are going to impact your local community. The other thing we're going to talk about is our Trouble Nation program. And this is where you can find local red, wine, and blue affiliated groups in your community so that you can join them. Or if you don't see one near you, you can start your own group. And we are going to be here to support you doing that. So, Drew, if you could go to the next slide, we are going to start talking about both of these programs, and we would love to get you guys involved and working on these tonight. So, first of all, like I said, one of the biggest ways you can impact elections is to talk to everyone you know about the issues, about who is on the ballot, about why they need to turn out to vote, and making sure they have a plan and the information they need to actually get there. Because the next election cycle, even though I know Virginia and New Jersey, you guys have governor races, a lot of us have local elections. We know there is low turnout in local elections, but we cannot, at this point in history in our country, not have people turning out to vote. We need to come out in waves to vote. And so we need to start doing that right now, even though elections seem far away. Primaries, maybe in a few months where some of you live. We do have elections in November. A lot of them are going to be local elections. So even though it may feel far away, you know what you need to do right now? You need to build that list of people that you are going to talk to come election time. And that starts now. And it could be your friend you run into in the grocery store who talks to you about that Facebook post you made. It could be that high school friend who makes a comment on your social media post. Maybe you meet somebody new who shares your values. You know what? Come November, you might forget their names. So we need to start making that list now. I want you to think about it, if you're my age, as your Rolodex of voters. And to build that list, we can help you do that very easily with our Rally platform. Next slide, Drew. So what you can do on Rally, and I'm going to show you this right here. This is an example of building your list. You add the names of the people, you meet that friend at the grocery store, and you go in and you add them to your Rolodex list here in Rally. You talk to that person on Facebook, you're going to add them to your list. And then come November, when we need to start, or actually probably October, September, when we need to start reaching out to people, that list is right there for you. You can build it all year long and you're going to be ready to go. Next slide, Drew. The other thing that we are going to be able to do through Rally is we're going to be able to educate and inform our friends because we are going to put information in there that you can share. We are going to give you explainers to share with people, videos to share with people about the issues. Right now, we have things in there about the SAVE Act, which is a voter suppression bill going through Congress. Lots of good information, the truth that you can get out to people. All of this will be on the Rally platform as a one-stop shop. So what I would love to do is get you started on that right now. So I'm going to go to the next slide and show you how you can do that. And we're going to drop in the chat right now and we're going to stop the chat. By the way, if you're on our live stream and you would like to come back over to the Zoom, feel free. Please join us over here. I believe there's a link in the chat. Right now, if you want to get on the Rally platform and you want to start building your list of people, get that Rolodex of voters going, and you have information to share, you can text Rally to 59868, or you can scan this QR code. There's also a link in the chat right now that you can just click if that is easier for you. And what you're going to do is once you get there, you are going to be going to our website where you will see our Rally Your Squad page. You are going to click on your state. If you are in Michigan, Ohio, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, or Virginia, we have organizers there, so you are going to see your state there. If you are not in one of those states, you will see a map of the country. Just click all other states there to get yourself joined. So text Rally to 59868, scan that QR code, or click on the link in the chat. Next slide, Drew. Okay, and once you click on your state, you are going to be asked to join the campaign. It's really easy. You're just going to click to join campaign. And then you either have to, you probably have to sign up if you're new to Rally. You're going to sign up for an account. This is easy, like you do everything else online. You can use Google or Yahoo, and you'll get a magic link in your inbox that you click. Or you can use another email if that's what you need to do. There are no passwords. This is just a magic link that will always just let you in. So you're going to do that. You're going to start signing up for an account. Next slide, Drew. And then the first thing you will be asked to do is to set up your profile. Again, this is something we do all the time. You're going to enter your information, and then what will happen is once you do that, the voter file is going to pop up, and it's great. So if I entered my name, the voter file, I live in Ohio, will pop up with everybody who matches my information. And I'm going to find myself, and I'm going to click Julie Womack. And if you don't see yourself, that's okay. Just click none of these. But please go check your voter registration because we know purges have happened nationwide. But you're going to set up your account by entering your info, match yourself to the voter file, and then next slide, Drew. And then we're going to start building that list. This is what we're going to be doing, people. We are going to be entering all of the voters we run into. We're going to talk to our neighbor. We're going to get our neighbors on there. We're going to get our family on there. We are going to get our book clubs on there, the people we work out in the gym with, anybody we run into. We're going to build that Rolodex so that when you get back to election time, you're ready to go. So when you get in here, you're going to click on a tab called the Tasks tab, which is right here on the screen. And you will see a thing that says Build Your Squad and add your contact. And so that's all you have to do is you're going to click add contact. Next screen, Drew. And this is where you start entering those names. You're just going to make that list. You're going to know exactly where it is. It's going to be in Rally and you're going to have it ready to go. So you're going to enter your contact's name. So let's say I'm going to, enter my husband's name. I would put in his name. I would put in the city he lives in and his age range. We are not asking for phone numbers or emails because we are not contacting any of these people. These are your friends to reach out to, but we want to match them to the voter file because then you're going to get good information on their voting history. Like, do they normally vote in midterm elections? Have they already asked for a ballot? Like, this is going to be really helpful information. So it's the same process. You enter their information and then you match them to the voter file. And then next slide, Drew. I think I might be at the end of mine. Yep, go back one slide. Thank you. I went too far. And then the other thing is once you've entered your contacts, keep adding them, right? Add them from now until election day so that you can do that. And then you're going to go back into Rally and go back to that tasks tab, and you are going to see things that we are putting in there that you can share. Good information you can share out with your friends. And keep checking back because we are going to keep adding more and more information into Rally that you can share out, explaining all the issues of the day. This is a good place to turn when you really, do need information to share. So now, though, I also want to talk to you about Trouble Nation, and well, I don't want to. I'm going to bring up Renee Seckel, who is on our Trouble Nation team, to talk to you about our program, how you can find local groups near you, or how you can start a local group.
Hi, all. As Julie said, I'm Renee Seckel. I am the Deputy Director of our Trouble Nation program. And basically, you can move to the first Trouble Nation slide. So just like it says on the slide, Trouble Nation is our national grassroots organizing program. And basically, we know that there are people all across this country who are already either doing really good work or who want to get started into like doing good work and need a place to plug in. So we created Trouble Nation, and it's our national grassroots organizing program. And we provide you a platform and training and scaffolding and support. You provide your own manpower, your own creativity and energy and ambition and ideas. And critically, you're not chapters. You're your own group. We're just here for support, which means that we don't tell you what to do. Now, we will sometimes have suggestions for things you can do, but we do not tell you what to do. And you aren't like chapter of Red, Wine, and Blue. Can you go to the next slide, please? So Trouble Nation, we launched in fall of 2023, and the response has been staggering. So we are hoping that we are at like 699 groups now. So we're hoping that maybe by tomorrow we've hit 700. So that means if you go to redwine.blue/Trouble Nation, you can find on the map, you can search by your county, by your zip code, by your city, or even just your state, and find groups on the map. As you can see, we have a lot of this country covered. But if you don't see a group where you are, then you can start one. And the process is pretty simple. There's a place right on the website where you can click get started, and you fill out a form, and we will probably be in contact with you, and we'll get you up and started. We have all sorts of programs to make sure you get support. So if you're sitting here going, well, I'd like to start a group, but I don't know what I'm doing, we're here for you. We've got help to get you going.
Definitely go to Trouble Nation there. You will scroll about halfway down the page and you will find the map. So put in your zip code, see if there is a group near you. If there's no group near you, or you know what, maybe there's a group near you, but it's like 3 cities over and you want to start something where you live, go for it. You can submit a request to our Trouble Nation team and they will reach out to you and help you get started.
There's one question, Julie, about the difference between Trouble Nation and Red, Wine, and Blue. And we
Oh,
get this a lot, so do you mind if I address it?
you may go for it, Renee.
Trouble Nation is a program of Red, Wine, and Blue. So our Trouble Nation team, we all work for Red, Wine, and Blue. We're part of Red, Wine, and Blue. It's just the part of the work that we do is Trouble Nation.
All right. Thank you, Renee, for joining and sharing. We appreciate it. And we hope everybody has a really great evening.